and welcome back to Book and Page. It is the final Hobbit video. We are at the end of The Hobbit. Yay! And we do have a few things that we still have to finish off with. So let's get right into it with a summary of the final chapter of this book, The Last Stage. Okay, so Bilbo and Gandalf arrive in Rivendell, where they stay for a week, recovering. We get two lovely songs about rest, and hear that Gandalf was helping rid Mirkwood of the Necromancer before he reappeared at the Battle of the Five Armies. Then Bilbo and Gandalf carry along. They stop to dig up the troll gold that the dwarves buried on the way in, and they decide to split it between the two of them. Bilbo says, "You take it." Gandalf says, "You probably might need more than you think." And they keep going from there. Bilbo finally sees Bag End in the distance, and Tolkien gives us one of my favorite pieces of verse, which I actually drew a bunch of hearts around. I love this. I love this verse. Too bad, though. Turns out most of Bilbo's things have been auctioned off because everyone's just assumed he died within the year that he was gone. So Bilbo has to buy back most of his own furniture and possessions, but he can't buy back his own reputation, which took a distinctive nosedive among the hobbits. He's a little weird now. And we end the story a few years later with a visit from Gandalf and Balin, who tells us that the Lonely Mountain, Dale, and Lake Town are all flourishing. The Master God is comeuppance. Yay! And Bilbo is okay being, on the whole, only a small part of the world. And that's sort of a nice place to end. Like, just, I'm okay. I'm okay with this. I'm okay being here. And not that meme where the dog's sitting in a room on fire going, "This is okay. This is fine." No, like, I'm actually okay with this. I had my adventure, we did some things. I hope I made the world a little better of a place. I'm okay being part of this cosmic system. So, before we get to the ending though, a few things to talk about. My favorite being, hey, music's back! Did you notice? I mean, we get 3 pieces of music. 3 separate pieces of music in this chapter, and that's like a significantly large amount that we should be sitting up and paying attention to this. Like, oh hey, maybe this is important. Especially since the last song we got was actually back in chapter 15, with the Dwarven War song that Bilbo was like, "I'm not sure I like this. I'm not sure this is gonna lead us anyplace good." And notably, actually before that was chapter 10, with the Lake Town song of, "Hey, the king under the mountain is gonna give us a bunch of gold. Yay!" So, nothing like celebrating anything that has meaning for Bilbo. It's much more material songs. We gotta act like the big guys beat up the people trying to take our treasure songs. But here, the music has changed completely back to what we had. And in fact, like, directly back to what we had. The first song we get in this chapter is a similar song to the first Rivendell song that we got, where it has that tra-la-la-lally tune, where it talks about the grass is growing in the valley, the wind is in the valley. But what's interesting is this song on the surface appears lighthearted and nice because it does have these nonsense words in it. But there's actually something that's changed in it, and most notably, rather than describing the valley, the line after the tra-la-la-la-lally changes to "come back to the valley." So it's an invitation in, because that lighthearted and playful image to the song is actually sort of a veneer for a song that directly, for the first time, acknowledges the hardships that Bilbo's gone through on this trip. If we actually take a look at it, the first verse speaks about the death of Smaug. Like, it fully acknowledges that this was a thing that happened, and it was probably a big thing for certain people, But it also says, but the world continued outside of that. This was a big event for you, but the grass is still growing, and the river's still flowing. Tra-la-la-la-la, come back to the valley. So it is this recognition that this big thing happened, but did it change everything? No. Did it change you? Yes, probably. Because the second verse highlights the choice then that Bilbo had to make at the end of this adventure. Because what happens in the second verse is there is a distinct comparison that's not even really a competition for the elves between nature and material wealth and gold. So the stars are much better than jewels. So's the moon. And our hearth fire is better than gold. Like, it is this sort of comparison of, we recognize this choice you made to return to a more quiet lifestyle with nature and your house and your armchair and your fire and your garden. We recognize you made this choice and we think it's a good one. So no judgments. Choosing your home over staying at the Lonely Mountain and getting even more gold, it makes sense. We agree with this. And that's literally it. We recognize this big thing happened, but the world has continued on. We recognize that you've been affected by this, but you're returning home. You've chosen to return home. And then the third verse directly recognizes that this must have affected Bilbo. He's sad and weary. He's tired. And they recognize that. They say, like, come in, let us take care of you for a while because you are heartsick. You've suffered, you've lost friends, you're now far away from the friends you have, you miss home, that's where you're trying to go. Come in, rest here, and we will take care of you. And that is just a fantastic song overall that, again, is sort of coached in this playful, nonsensical tra-la-la-la-la-ly that is actually saying a lot to Bilbo himself. Like, we recognize what you have done and what you have been through. Come home to us, and we will take care of you, and we will send you on home to your own armchair. And interestingly enough, the second song also sort of plays off of that idea. But it's a celebration of rest. You've been through a lot, and there are things to celebrate, but also rest is needed. But interestingly enough, the sort of playful nature, veneer, but serious context of the first song is reversed in the second song. So it's a much more serious veneer, but it actually comes off as a much more playful song, especially considering the banter between Bilbo and the elves afterwards, where Bilbo says, "Your singing could wake drunk goblins, but I thank you for it." Because of course they're singing about, shh, we gotta let him sleep. We gotta let him sleep. We'll sing a lullaby. Gotta let him sleep. And he's just like, "You literally woke me up, guys." And the elves are like, "Well, your snoring could wake up a dragon." Like, it is sort of this recognition that you can't be as serious all the time. And that's helping Bilbo heal. You can address the hardships you've been through, and you can have some humor about it. Because humor, in fact, is how you're more likely to survive all this. There's a reason why when you watch a lot of medical shows, you get more joking around. And those are, in fact, the funner ones to watch when they are willing to joke around. But that's how doctors have to deal with these things. Because they don't just get to go home. They lose a patient, you've still got the rest of your shift you gotta get through. So humor is how you survive. And Bilbo's being told, this is okay. This is okay. We can laugh a bit. Your snoring will wake a dragon. Wait, you already did. But it's okay, because the dragon's dead. And you can rest now. And that's in fact the agreement that they have. They tell him, well, you've been sleeping for a while. And he says, well, sleep's really helpful and I'm going to go get some more of it. Cool, cool, cool. And they're just like, yeah, cool. We'll see you when you wake up. Hopefully your weariness will be gone. Cool. There's a joke, and then again there's the acceptance of you need time. You've been through a lot, you need time, but we're also going to help you talk about it. We're going to help you talk about it in different ways. through music, through banter, through serious retelling of it. Rivendell is where the place you're going to be able to breathe. But again, the recognition that he's not going to stay here. Though I should note that he does continue to visit Rivendell throughout his life. He goes to visit the elves, probably because, again, they're accepting. They understand what he's gone through. They have a history of this as well. So they're trying to help him through it. And it's interesting because his own poetry then seems to be affected by this. Because we get this poem, which I'll read in a minute, and it is one of the few pieces of poetry directly from Bilbo that we actually get. The only other one we get, really poetry song-wise, is the Addercop song from Mocking the Spiders. But if you compare that, that song's much more similar to the Goblin songs or the Warg songs where they're taunting the company. And that's specifically, he's taunting his enemy to draw them out and defeat them. So it would be a bad thing if that were the only verse type that we get from Bilbo. This is the only way he's been affected. Well, no. Something different here is happening, and he's taking the more elven song approach here through this two sets of verse. Okay, so, roads go ever, ever on, over rock and under tree, by caves where never sun has shone, by streams that never find the sea, over snow by winter sown, and through the merry flowers of June, over grass and over stone, and under mountain in the moon. Roads go ever, ever on, under cloud and under star, yet feet that wandering have gone, turn at last home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known. So what's actually happening here again, Bilbo is taking the elven song. This thing has happened. It's happened to me. And I can't separate myself fully from it. But I can overcome it by returning home and being glad to return home. And what's really interesting is we get a direct response from Gandalf here. Gandalf looked at him. This is immediately after. Gandalf looked at him. "My dear Bilbo," he said, "something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were." So even Gandalf can look at him at this moment of poetry and say, something's changed. Something's different here. Yes, hi Yantegs. Back to help with the video you are? I have to hold her because if not, she'll walk on my notes. So something's directly changed with Bilbo, and he's able to articulate everything he's experienced through his poetry at that moment. And that's actually, again, sort of a lead-in to the idea that Bilbo will go on to write down this book that we're reading. In fact, it's referenced further on, but he does go on to write it, and he calls it there and back again a Hobbit's Holiday. So this poetry is the beginning of him being able to look back on everything and say, yeah, I did experience that. I made mistakes, I made choices, I overcame a lot of issues. It's really meaningful, and for Gandalf to acknowledge it and say something's different. Like, that's the moment that we actually really needed Gandalf to say, like, you've changed. And Bilbo for just, yeah, I can articulate it now. I'm okay having changed. And some of the changes we actually see with Bilbo are good changes. He's not wrecked by the experience that he's gone through. He's become more social in a lot of ways. Tolkien tells us that he continued to have elves and dwarves and Gandalf and other visitors into his house. And he's not weirded out by that like he was when all the dwarves showed up at the beginning of the book. He's grown. And he's willing to share his experiences. And he becomes more generous. A lot of his gold, they tell us, other than buying back his own furniture, was spent on gifts. Extravagant and useful and things like that. So he's willing to share because he's, again, learned that material things are not the important things. If he just held on to the gold, that wouldn't be having learned any lessons from any of this. No, so he shares the wealth. He gives gifts. And he's also okay with this change in reputation. We don't get a sense that he's upset that he's no longer considered respectable. He's okay with the solitude that non-respectability gives him. Probably, again, because he's realized that the Hobbit idea of respectability is always doing the same thing and never doing anything different. But that's an issue when there are things to be done. He had to get involved in this journey and help make the world a better place. And that's more important, judgment-wise, than respectability among the hobbits. Because, yeah, I did something. And he's not ashamed of that. He hangs his sting above the mantelpiece. And the mithril mail that he got from Thorin, he actually sets up a mannequin in the hall and then donates to the local museum. So, yeah, like, he's not afraid of his adventure. It helped change him and make him a better person. But he's also, again, in the very end, not afraid to admit that he's a small part of that. That bigger forces were at work. He's okay being a small part of the world and welcoming people into his home. He's okay being hospitality king, as it were, and kind and giving and generous. All the things he learned from the dwarves on their journey. So good on you, Bilbo. Less dragons in this world, the better, right? Okay, so normally I end off these series saying I'm going to keep reading, but this series of Book and Page is all finished up. So next week we will be starting on a new one, and we'll be doing some Greek tragedy. Woo! So first video after this one to expect a video discussing some of the points of Greek tragedy. So be prepared for some Aristotle, who's also Greek. So I need to get reading on that one, and I hope you keep reading in the meantime. See you next time.